What is a loose outline versus maybe a more structured outline?
Well, for me, when I do an outline, it gets much easier after you've written a few books because I think you sort of find an internal rhythm. So for me, my books tend to fall around 70 to 90,000 words. That's kind of the average range. And I tend to have about, 30 to 40 chapters. And my chapters tend to be 1,500 to 2,000 words each. So having gone through it and now knowing that, I can sort of lay out, what it's going to be. So, I tend to almost like note carding for a screenplay. I usually take an Excel document and I just put 40, rows, and I just sort of write each chapter what I think will happen, just a couple sentences. I don't go too crazy. But I do know other people that create, 30, 40-page outlines where they're really going into the nitty-gritty and the detail of it. So again, it just depends what works for you.
So basically, when you start a new novel, you will go to that Excel document and you'll do 40 rows and just loosely put out, maybe not even what the title's called, but
sure.
just...
Yeah, the title's usually, I usually start with the title, but sometimes I change it, sometimes it's just sometimes I know it's just a working title, other times, I come up with a better idea,
Sure, so then just one or two sentences about what's going to happen.
Yeah, and it's not always complete. I find if I know the ending, it's usually for the best, but sometimes I don't. And sometimes I just reach a point where I'm like, you know what, I'll just have to figure it out when I get there, and I'll start. But usually I try to know, what the ending is going to be. So
have you ever gotten stuck where you really couldn't sort of write your way out of it?
No, but sometimes it's more work than it would have been. So I have a science fiction series called Talon, and the fourth book in that, I did have an outline. It was a loose outline, but there were a couple things I think I should have nailed down a little bit. So I got about 3/4, and I was like, you know what? I need to go back and change some stuff. So I kind of put that aside and worked on something else for a little while, and then I'll come back to it and kind of not start over, but just backtrack a little bit, change some things, let the effects ripple out, and then go forward and finish it. But in Caine, it's usually been pretty straightforward. I think I tend to have a clearer idea of what the ending's going to be, because it's with science fiction, it's sort of tough because anything can happen. It's a very big genre, whereas with spy thrillers, it's a little more contained, and the outcomes need to be a little more imaginable, like sort of by definition.
Was it your intention to make it a series?
Oh yeah.
Oh, from the very beginning?
Yeah, I didn't know if I could really follow through with it, but I always loved those kinds of series characters. I was a huge comic book fan growing up. I like that kind of storytelling. So certainly in my head, I always thought, as I was writing it, I had ideas for what the next book would be. And I tried to kind of just keep those compartmentalized, because it's like, well, we'll see. Let's see if you get through this one, But yeah, I intended it to be a series.
Do you have writing rules that you live by?
What do you mean? Can you elaborate more?
Some people say, never be boring. I don't know. These are these cliche, writing is rewriting. There's so many different ones, but ones that you just...
Well, I don't know if they're rules. I would say that maybe they're more... Well, the only rule is once I start a project, I write every day. It's a job to me, So in between books, I might not, but once I have started a book, it's like, okay, I'm now writing 2,000 words a day on this book. Usually I take off weekends, Monday through Friday. I try to be professional about it. So I guess that's a rule. But in terms of guidelines I try to follow, I read a lot of books, Before I started, one of the things that inspired me to start was I would read books, and I think if you read enough and write enough, you come to a point where you start to realize that you're reading something like, I could do better than this, or I could do it at this. I could at least do something as good as this. Maybe I could do something better than this. And I noticed a lot of books, I felt like the locations didn't really come alive for me. I would read and they would just say, oh, we're in Syria, and it never really felt like it, or the author didn't really dive into it in more detail. And that was something I wanted to do differently, because again, going back to Ian Fleming, one of the things I appreciate about his books are he was a journalist and he had an eye for detail. And when you read one of his books, you really get the sense that he went to that place, and you feel like you've gone there. And it's even stranger with him because he was writing in the 1950s. So you almost feel like you've gone back in time, to this other place, because that place he's writing about, doesn't exist anymore. So I always try to make sure that I am bringing the location to life, for the reader, like without going overboard. I don't want to like pound them over the head with details, but I just want them to feel like they were there. I also, I think from the cinematic side, a thing that I would notice is I would feel like the action in books sometimes would kind of fall flat for me. Like the example I always give is you'd read a thriller, and at the end, the guy's chasing the bad guy up to a roof, and he gets to the roof, and he shoots him, and the guy falls off the roof, and that's the end, And I was like, that's too easy, Like, so, to me, like, if that's going to be your climax, like, the guy should run up to the roof, and then the other guy jumps over to the next building, and then the hero jumps, but he falls through the skylight. Now he's running underneath the bad guy. I always try, so I call that, I always try to escalate the action. I want the action to like sort of build, and so like, yes, but, or does the hero succeed? Yes, but, or does he fail? Yes, and, like kind of keep it going to one or two levels, beyond what would be obvious when you start the scene. So I don't think there are rules per se, but those are things I always try to do. That's important to me. That's kind of what I like to see in a book, so that's what I try to put into mine.
Are your books heavy on dialogue, or it's mostly action?
I don't know, honestly. I'd say a little both. I mean, I'd say it's pretty even. I mean, it's a thriller, so I think you're going to have more action than in a drama. But I certainly don't intentionally cut the dialogue, but I do try to write. I think my style is naturally a little more terse, more on the sort of Hemingway or Chandler side than the Fitzgerald side. Like I think that's just my natural rhythm.
And do you speak out the characters? Do you?
No.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
I don't. I do know authors who do that. And I also know authors who dictate instead of actually typing. They speak it. I've tried to do that, but it's very alien to me. I just feel the connection with my fingers to the keyboard just feels much more natural. But no, I don't speak the dialogue.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that, but I know it works for some people.
When I directed the independent movie that I did, which I also wrote, one of the actresses said it would drive her crazy. She said I would be mouthing the words next to the camera, which I wasn't consciously aware of doing. I certainly wasn't trying to do that, but she's like, "Stop it!" And I was like, "What?" She's like, "I see your mouth moving." Like, so
That's great.
maybe as I'm writing, I am, and I just don't realize it. I don't know.
That should have been in the player. That's really funny. By the way, what was that film about? Just quickly.
It's a very, very strange. It is a comedy about bad Catholic schoolgirls.
Ah, okay. I'm sure there's an audience.
But it's not what you would think.
Oh, okay.
I should have. I would probably have made much more money if I'd made it exactly what you think it would be. But it's much more of it's kind of a cross between John Waters and John Hughes.
Okay. Did you go to Catholic school?
I didn't, but my girlfriend in high school did.
Ah, okay.
So I sort of had an exterior view
Sure,
of
sure.
the insanity.